Well, we're back on the turntable.
Oh, that should be a rounding experience. Gee.
Well, I should say we're back on it because we never left it, except we did on the show because we have so many other things going on.
Oh, yeah.
But in the meantime, there's been a lot of work going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that we've been doing while working on the turntable is, well, we're just back from the train show in St. George.
Right.
And, well, it's not so much a train show as an open house.
Yes, it's sort of like a scavenger hunt because you go around and see all these different layouts.
And we saw some stuff we've never seen before.
Right.
Which is always exciting. It's always fun to get down there.
Mm-hmm.
And so next week we'll be looking at the St. George footage.
Yes.
But for now, let's take a look at the progress on the turntable. Because, well, there has been progress on the turntable. Now, when last we looked at the turntable, we were just getting ready to do the bottom of the pit. All the woodwork was in place. And now the somewhat daunting idea of plastering in the rest of it.
That just had me bugged.
Oh, I've been worried about this ever since dreaming the whole project up. All of the woodwork has been done. And now my goal has been to plaster in the contour.
Oh, gee.
Anyway, the next step then is to build up the earthen section of the pit with the spacer layer in, the bottom in, and the ring rail footing in place. Now I have to build that whole area up between the bottom of the pit and the ring rail footing. Because the actual pit, of course, is just a big earthen dish. Now, normally I'd be using Sculpt-A-Mold here, which is a mixture of plaster and paper. It dries very quickly, but it doesn't shrink or crack. The problem is it dries very quickly. You've only got about 10 minutes of working time, and that just, there's no way I can do this in 10 minutes without it hardening. So I chose to use perf-a-tape mud, which is sort of a vinyl product or something. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it isn't a purely plaster product, but it's used, of course, for sheetrock. When you put it on this thick, it takes forever to dry, and it does shrink and crack. Now, if you've been following along on the channel, you know that Dwayne has made us a bunch of really great parts here for the turntable on his CNC router. This is a template that he made for us to come up with an exact contour for the bottom of the turntable pit. I can, in fact, mount it to the center shaft for the turntable and then run it around here and get an exact contour. My base coat was on there so thick that it cracked quite a bit, but then from that point I put it on in very thin layers which would actually dry in just a couple of hours, and I could sand and apply another layer. I temporarily mounted the sides of the turntable bridge to make sure that everything was going to clear and that everything was good. And the contour is looking really good. Everything's coming together just fine. At the outer edge, I'm leaving just a small amount of the footing here for the ring rail ties, so that you can kind of see that it's actually a cement footing and it's not completely buried in the dirt. So I'm leaving a little exposed edge right here. So here at Durango, boy, the ties are really crooked on here, but you can see that cement footing, and theirs is pretty much buried. I'm going to expose a little bit more of the edge of the cement footing. Where I really need to make some adjustments to the contour of the pit, I'm using my Sheetrock tool here. It really takes the material down quickly, and I have to be careful that I don't get too carried away with this. For the most part, I'm handling this with just a sanding block, and that actually takes it down quite well, and it leaves a much better finish. And then I can go ahead and apply another thin coat. When the contour is just right, it just barely exposes the very edge of that spacer layer in there. And when the paint is on here, that won't show up at all. There's actually about 6 thin coatings over that cracked and shrunken base coat to fill everything in. And just bit by bit, I'm building it up and sanding it back down and establishing the exact contour that I want for the pit. Now I'm going to have to build the deck, which sits on top of the bridge here. The ties and rail and decking and everything go on top of there. And you can see here what that's going to look like. The ties for the deck are really long. These ties here are 8-inch ties, and it's actually going to have to be a little bit longer than that. Moreover, the contour that I want, the dimensions I want, are the square ties like these shorter ties here. So I thought, well, I'm going to have Steve cut this out of some red cedar because I need full 9-inch ties across here. These ties need to be very accurate, and so I like to get Steve to do it because he has a proper table saw, where we just have one of those little benchtop units. Doesn't work very well. Moreover, I'm going to need a bunch of these little 1-inch ties for the ring rail. So I had Steve cut the whole business out. So here are the long ties for the decking and the short 1-inch ties for the ring rail. So here's what the deck is going to look like with the proper square 9-inch long ties. That looks really good. I'm thinking about making the entire decking so that I can remove it from the base, the big main beam here. I doubt very much that I'd ever need to remove it, but mostly this is just going to facilitate building it because I can spike the rail and put the decking on here with it flat on the bench as opposed to being mounted on the big main beam. Okay, on to the little 1-inch ties that support the ring rail. Steve cut us out about 110 of these. I figured I would need something around 100 of them, and yeah, I used up a little over 100. You can see why. Here, there's just so many of them going around the footing there for the ring rail. So before I can mount these in place, I want to get stain on them, and then I need to get finished color and texture on the retaining wall and the footing for the ring rail. And a good base color, a brown base color to go in the bottom of the pit. There'll be texture over that, but just so that white can't ever come poking through here. And if I figured right, and it looks like I actually did, there's just enough space underneath the main beam here for the ties, the ring rail, and the little wheel trucks that support the end of the beam on the ring rail. So next up, some cement color here on the retaining wall and the footings for the ring rail. The paint here on the retaining wall shouldn't show at all, but you know, again, I want to make sure I'm covering up all that white on the outside chance that something gets scratched or nicked, and I don't want that white coming through. I'm just using this really cheap craft paint that you can get even at Walmart. It's very, very affordable, and it works just fine. These affordable paints, these cheap craft paints, they work out really well for a lot of different things. In this case, I'm not even using a paper plate or anything as a palette. I'm just dumping the paint directly out into the turntable pit and then smoothing it around with my brush. Again, very little of this paint is going to show. Mostly it's all going to be covered up by textures and weathering. It's just a base coat. So several coats of this to assure good coverage. Like I say, all of this will be covered up by earth texture or concrete texture, except for the footing for the ring rail ties. That particular color will be the finished color. The ring rail ties sit right up against the concrete retaining wall, and so I need to put the finished texture and everything on the retaining wall before I can mount the ties. What I'm using here, if you remember from the other videos, is just a printout of an actual concrete wall that I'm going to decoupage over the surface here of the retaining wall, and then there will be weathering and other colors over the top of that. But I kind of wanted to establish all these little shadows and details just by using a printed surface. Okay, back to the Sureform tool, where the dirt is up against the retaining wall. Right now, the sound deadening board is just right on top of the plywood, and I don't want that edge to show. I want to just taper that down, and I'm probably going to put quite a bit of taper on here. as I'm working with this. I think the more taper I put on here, the better it's going to look. On the actual turntable, there's some wooden beams that run around here to keep the dirt from going over the edge into the pit. But I think what I'm going to do is just expose the top of the concrete wall by tapering the dirt right up to the retaining wall. I always take inspiration doing these kinds of things because there is going to be a certain amount of dirt that has rolled over the edge and is down between the ties. And seeing how that looks with the sawdust down in here, I find that somewhat inspirational because the finished texture will look something vaguely like that with material all down in between the ties. Where the tracks actually approach the pit, there is a very, very heavy beam sitting on top of the cement retaining wall, much heavier than the ties, and the rails also spike to that very heavy beam. I did some careful sizing on the computer and printer to get the cement textures to be more or less the exact size, and then I'm cutting those strips out on the paper cutter here to the exact size they need to be to layer over the edge of the retaining wall. And then I'm gluing these in place just using Mod Podge. I'll put a good coating on the back of the paper and then apply those to the edge here. And then I'm also going to be putting a layer of this over the surface of the whole thing to help secure it in place. And because it's a matte finish, you won't really see it. I'm applying an extra coat here right along the edge at the top of that to make sure that it's really well secured. Otherwise, this top edge might want to come loose. And again, because you won't see it, I'm able to apply some right down in the corner here, again, to make sure that that corner is really well secured, and then just wipe the excess away. And although I'm getting it all over the surface here, it dries matte and you really won't know that it's there at all. Double checking here just to make sure that this top is really well secured. There are a few places where it's a little bit loose, but even at this point I can come back and add yet another coat, making sure that it gets down in the crack and really helps secure that in place. And there we are with the retaining wall. Now there's going to be some other texture and paint on the top of this, but for the most part what you see here is what the finished retaining wall is going to look like, with some weathering materials running down over the surface and so on. But it gives it that nice cast concrete texture and feel without doing a tremendous amount of actual texturing here. Now the color here on the footing, again, it's mostly just sort of a base coat. Once the ties are glued in place, then there's going to be a lot of spilled soot and cinders and dirt down on top of this footing. So this gray that's the concrete color here on the footing is just mostly sort of a base coat. It will show through in a lot of places, but that's really not the finished look. We've had really good luck using this technique of just printing a texture out on the computer printer.
Yes, bricks, anything you can find on there. It's much cheaper to do it that way.
And you've had really good luck with it.
I think so.
You kind of put me on to how to scale all this and get it the right size.
Right.
And in this case, there's going to be some other weathering and texture over the top of this.
Right.
But this is going to make a just ideal system for making it look like cast concrete.
Right.
Now, when Dwayne made us all these various templates, one of the templates he made, which is going to work out really great, is this complete circular template that will align the ring rail and make it into an absolutely perfect circle as it goes around. This will have the ring rail mounted in about a ½ inch from the retaining wall on top of the ties. But the whole thing just sets in place and will allow me to spike the rail directly on top of the ties, ensuring that it's an absolutely perfect circle going around here. Anyway, on to the ties for the ring rail. You can see that those are just a little bit shorter than the footing, which looks really nice. But before I can glue these in place, I'm going to go ahead and stain them. So I'm using a bit of blue painter's tape here. I've wrapped it all the way around some foam core so that it's sticky side out, and then that way I can stick all of my ties down onto this painter tape, and then I'm going to apply Watco's brown walnut oil on top of those. Because it's mounted to the tape that way, it'll leave the bottom unstained, which will help ensure a good glue joint. So I now have a stockpile of 110 1-inch ties, and I'm ready to glue those down to the footing. I'm just using regular old white Elmer's glue, should work just fine for this. And I'm just eyeballing the spacing in here, and if I get some a little bit crooked, I fully intend to have some a little bit random and crooked, because boy are they random and crooked on the actual turntables. I'm not going to go this extreme, but I'm also not going to really worry if some of them are in there a little bit crooked. Like I say, I fully intend to have some of them in there a little bit crooked. Okay, on to the ring rail. I'm making that out of Code 250 chemically weathered rail from Llagas Creek, and I'm blessed to have a Llagas Creek rail bender here. They don't make these anymore, but you can find them online. At any rate, this way I'm able to set that up for the exact amount of curvature that I want, and then I keep test fitting that in there to make sure that it's accurate. But this way I was able to build up a circle all the way around the pit just using my rail bender. So at this point I've got 12 feet of rail here with a seam in the middle, and so I've got a certain amount of overlap. And I'm going to have to cut off that overlap, because as I set the rail in place here, I've got about 2 feet of overlap. So I'm going to cut off about 1 foot from each rail and create a seam. And using a rail joiner here, I will then come back and silver solder this joint so that it can't pull apart while I'm spiking it. Both joints are accomplished the same way, and that's by cleaning off some of the weathering material that's on the rails, and then sliding a rail joiner over both rails, creating a joint, and then coming back with Stay Bright silver solder and silver soldering the joint so it can't come apart. Silver solder is basically just regular solder, but it has a certain amount of silver content in it, which makes it much stronger. It also means that you have to solder at a higher temperature. But I've got a variable temperature soldering iron, and so I turn it all the way up to maximum temperature, and as you can see, the solder flows neatly into the joint. Now, as I mentioned, Dwayne made us these great templates to do curves and tracks and so on, and he cut out a special template just for spiking the rail. Now that I've got the complete circle cut out to the exact right size, I can take this template and it slides down over the center shaft at the middle of the pit, and then that aligns the outer edge of the ring rail to the edge of the template, and I can then come in from the outside of the rail and spike that in place. I put some shims in here just to hold the rail tightly up against the template while I was spiking so it couldn't move around. I've got tons of room here to come in on the outside of the rail and get the outside spikes in place. And with the outside spikes in place on all sides of the circle, that really holds everything tightly in place. I'm using Micro Engineering's large spike. These have turned out to be very difficult to get. I ordered some more from Micro Engineering, and they said that they don't have any more, and they're trying to figure out how to go about manufacturing some more. At any rate, I need to find some more. Now the spikes go all the way through the ties and into the birch plywood below, which holds them tightly in place, but there's no way I can push the spikes in place all the way into the birch plywood. So the only way to make that work is to drill a pilot hole here with this great little engraving tool that Karen gave me. I'm just going ahead and leaving the sawdust in place because it helps me find the hole that I've drilled. I found if I blow the sawdust out of the way, then it's a little tricky to find the hole. At any rate, I can now push the spikes down through the pilot hole with my spiking pliers, and very simple to do. It just requires drilling 200 pilot holes. For spiking the inside of the rail, I'm still using the template, but just the 190-degree section. And then that way I can drill my pilot holes and spike at the far edge of this 90-degree section and just slide that around as I'm going. But it just ensures that everything's going to be tightly in place as I'm putting the spikes in. My process was that I spiked every 15th tie, and then that way I could come back and do the spikes in between without the template or any guidance whatsoever. The rail would be tightly in place at that point. If my pilot hole didn't go all the way down into the plywood, I would get the spikes in about this far and they would hit the plywood and stop. So I'd have to pull the spike back up and push it back in and properly seat it. I want my spikes to look like this, nice and tightly down against the rail. So putting the ring rail in has proven to be about a 10-day project with all of the pilot holes and everything, but it's for the most part done at this point. My biggest concern right now is the alignment of the ring rail is so critical because the turntable bridge rides on that ring rail, and so if there are any high or low places, that's going to cause the bridge to go up and down. And it needs to ride absolutely level and line up perfectly with the tracks, and all of that is being guided by the ring rail. So I guess my next project's going to be to build the deck that goes on top of the beam here.
Oh boy, that has me really nervous.
And as I was mentioning, I think doing it in two pieces, so the deck is a removable part on top of this main bridge, and I think that'll just facilitate doing the work at the bench. But I can't do any of the approach tracks or anything else until I can see how it's going to line up with the ring rail and the little wheels that go under the bridge. So the next thing absolutely has to be the deck.
Yep, it sure does.
Anyway, I hope you're going to want to follow along with the rest of the turntable and roundhouse project here, as well as the train shows and other adventures.
More adventures to come.
So if you're not a subscriber to the channel, do subscribe, and of course click your notification bell, and then you'll be notified as we do these crazy things. And the easy peasy way to do that is to click on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we are not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Tuesday.
Right.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.